Throughout history, countless people have been accused of unthinkable crimes. Some were guilty, but many were not. In a time without forensic science, due process as we know it, and without the protection of public opinion, accusations alone were often enough to seal a fate. More often than not, those accusations unjustly fell on women. This season, we step away from the haunted locations and focus instead on 5 women and 1 child whose names were stained by rumor, fear, and misunderstanding. Were they villains, victims, or something in between? Surrounded by paranormal lore and lingering hauntings, these stories refuse to fade. This is not just a story about ghosts. It's a story about judgment, legacy, and the echoes of history that still whisper today. I'm Johnny Clash, a dad, a gamer, a former pro wrestler, and a lifelong observer of the unexplained. I'm not here to convince or dismiss. I'm here to document, to listen, and to stay with the questions that do not resolve neatly. This is Paranormal Unsettled. In Monroe, Connecticut, there is a glass case in a quiet room, and inside of it sits a doll. Its eyes are wide, its smile is stitched. People travel from all over the world just to look at it. They take pictures and videos. They speculate from the opposing side of the glass about what is really going on the inside. They say a name, and it sends shivers down some people's spines. Annabelle. But long before the doll, before the headlines and horror films, before the warnings not to touch the case, there was a girl, a child, a life that existed outside of the Conjuring and the Warrens Occult Museum. Her name was Annabelle Higgins, and somewhere along the way, the story of who she was became smaller than the story people wanted to share about her. Today, her name is attached to something feared, something locked away, something said to be extremely dangerous. When you look into the doll's eyes, you are looking into the eyes of another world. Annabelle Higgins was her name, and while we don't know much about her, we can speculate that she was a young girl whose life ended too soon, and whose name would one day be pulled from obscurity and attached to something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Before we start this deep dive, you must know that there is no real record of an Annabelle Higgins ever existing in Connecticut. This is very important to the story. Annabelle Higgins enters the historical record not through real documentation, but through testimony from 2 of the most controversial figures in paranormal history, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and what they included in interviews, articles, and books after they encountered the entity known as Annabelle. Although a creased black and white photograph of 3 women and a toddler appear on the New England Society for Psychic Research website and is claimed to depict Annabelle Higgins and her family, no death certificate or verified public record has ever been produced to confirm her existence. The details of her life and death exist only within the story as it was told by the investigators and repeated in interviews and books later on. And that's even before Hollywood got a hold of the story. You may feel a certain way about the Warrens, and trust me, I have my own opinions on them. But just know we will consider all accounts when diving into this story and tell Annabelle's story with honesty and the facts that we know. And this won't be the last time we hear about the Warrens, as their name is tied to some of the most famous cases in paranormal history, for better or for worse. So what do we actually know? The earliest version of the Annabelle case traces back to 1970. The story as told by the Warrens begins not with a haunted doll or a tragic newspaper clipping, but with a Raggedy Ann doll purchased as a gift. Donna, a nursing student, received the doll from her mother as she was preparing to graduate college with her own nursing degree. She brought it to the apartment she shared with her roommate Angie, and almost immediately, strange things started to happen. They claimed the doll began appearing in different positions and different rooms despite being left elsewhere. This started as gradual, small movements and eventually led to something much bigger. Unsure of what to do next, Donna and Angie reached out to a medium. A seance was arranged. During the session, the medium claimed to make contact with a spirit who identified herself as Annabelle Higgins. According to the story relayed to them, Annabelle had once lived on the property before the apartment complex was built. Those, they were told, were her happy times. She was said to have been only 7 years old when her body was discovered in the field where the building now stood. And that's really all we know. But through the medium, the spirit expressed that she felt safe and comfortable with Donna and Angie and simply wanted to stay with them and be loved. Moved by the story and feeling sympathy for the child, Donna gave the spirit permission to inhabit the doll and remain in her home. It wouldn't take long for them to believe they had made a big mistake. Whatever was attached to the doll, they would later claim, was not the harmless spirit of a young girl. This was no ordinary doll, and this would become no ordinary case. Notes allegedly began appearing on parchment paper, a type of paper that neither woman kept in the apartment. The handwriting was described as childlike, reading short pleas such as "help us" and "help Lou." Lou just happened to be Angie's fiancé. He had been present since the doll first entered the apartment and never trusted it. He would repeatedly warn Donna that something just felt wrong and he urged her to get rid of it, but she refused. One night, Lou jolted awake in terror, caught in what felt like a waking paralysis. Something many experts attribute to sleep patterns, but others claim to be paranormal. Unable to move, he watched as the doll appeared at his feet, slowly gliding up his body until it reached his chest. He claimed it began to strangle him, leaving him gasping for air until he blacked out. When he woke the next day, he was convinced that it had not been a dream and needed to confront whatever he believed was attached to the doll. His final encounter came shortly after. While preparing for a trip, Lou and Angie heard strange rustling coming from Donna's bedroom. Fearing an intruder, Lou cautiously approached the room. Inside, nothing appeared disturbed except for the doll lying on the floor. As he stepped closer, he felt as though something was standing behind him. When he turned, no one was there. Moments later, he doubled over in pain, clutching his chest. According to him, in later retellings, 7 claw-like scratches appeared across his torso, all going in different directions and burning as if freshly inflicted. The marks faded quickly, half gone by the next day and completely healed within 2. For Lou, it was proof that whatever was connected to the doll was neither harmless nor human. It was then Donna had enough of the strange behavior in her small apartment and contacted the church, who escalated the matter the only way they knew how. They contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren. For context, Ed and Lorraine Warren were known in the paranormal world as investigators, authors, and demonologists. And they really were the start of ghost investigations and brought them into the limelight of pop culture. They founded the NESPR, New England Society for Psychic Research. This was New England's paranormal research headquarters in 1952, and they have their names tied to some of the most prolific and most haunted cases in history, and the most polarizing, might I add, most of which you have already heard one way or another. They investigated what we know as the Perrin family haunting, the Enfield poltergeist, Amityville horror, Stepney Cemetery, the Smurl House, and the case of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, where demonic possession came into play in the courtroom in a ballsy move, but was ultimately dismissed as factual evidence. Lorraine was a medium who claimed to be clairvoyant, and Ed was a self-taught, self-proclaimed demonologist. Together, they worked side by side on these cases and left their mark in the paranormal world, for better or for worse. Ed and Lorraine quickly became involved after hearing about the doll and the strange activity in Donna's apartment. Much like with the other cases I mentioned earlier, in several instances, they placed themselves at the center of the investigation, at times edging out other researchers just for cases that would later draw worldwide attention. Maybe it was their name, maybe it was the notoriety, or maybe these cases really had something special going on. After speaking with Donna, Angie, and Lou, they concluded that the doll itself was not truly possessed. Instead, it was being manipulated by an inhuman presence. According to the Warrens, spirits do not typically possess objects like dolls or houses. They possess people. What they described in this case was an inhuman or demonic entity attaching itself to an object to gain attention, while its true goal was to eventually possess a human host. The entity began its manipulation subtly, moving the doll around the apartment in ways that sparked curiosity and the unease. Its goal was to draw recognition, to be acknowledged by occupants, which it achieved, especially with Lou. Donna claims she tried to throw the Raggedy Ann doll in the trash. However, the doll reappeared inside the apartment shortly after, sometimes in a place where it had no way of being returned by normal means. But when Donna called in that medium to communicate with the doll, they unknowingly gave the spirit an opportunity to interact directly. Following this, the doll became the focal point of increasingly disturbed phenomena around the apartment. The spirit caused it to move on its own, create the handwritten notes, and left drops of what was described as symbolic blood. But most alarming was the attack on Lou, which the Warrens interpreted as a warning sign. I think at that point they were way past the signs of warning. In their view, this was the infestation stage of the entity's activity, its final goal being complete possession of a human. Had the events continued for another few weeks, the Warrens believed the spirit could have harmed or even killed one or more of the apartment's occupants. To prevent further escalation, the Warrens arranged for a blessing of the apartment. Father Cook, who had called the Warrens initially, recited an Episcopal blessing, a 7-page ritual designed to fill the home with positive energy rather than to explicitly expel the evil. The emphasis was on protecting the occupants and saturating the space with light and divine power. Finally, as an added precaution, and at Donna's request, the Warrens took the Raggedy Ann doll with them when they left that day. Now, Ed reportedly placed it in the backseat of his car, avoiding highways in case the alleged inhuman presence remained active. Ed claimed the car began to swerve and stall at each turn, with power steering and brakes failing, bringing the vehicle close to multiple collisions. He is also said to have doused the doll with holy water and made the sign of the cross over it, after which the disturbances allegedly ceased, allowing them to arrive home safely. Once at the Warrens' home, the doll was placed in the chair next to Ed's desk. Over the following weeks, they reported it levitated and appeared in various rooms of the house, sometimes returning to Ed's chair, even when locked elsewhere. The doll allegedly demonstrated an aversion to religion, especially Catholic priests. In one notable account, Father Jason Bradford, a visiting exorcist, was said to have been involved in a near-fatal car accident after handling the doll, later claiming it was the doll itself. Over time, the Warrens secured Annabelle in a special case at their occult museum in Monroe, Connecticut. Since being enclosed, she has reported to no longer move on her own. Now, I'm not going to discredit the Warrens, and my opinion is just that, my opinion. If you have an opinion on the Warrens, no matter what side of history you fall on, drop it in the comments because I'm open to hearing from all sides.
Right back after this commercial break.
Now, after the case was put to rest and Annabelle was safely tucked away in her glass enclosure, Ed and Lorraine Warren were prolific in sharing the details of the case. Annabelle became one of the most well-known paranormal cases in history. She appeared in books authored or co-authored by the Warrens, such as The Demonologist, The World's Most Haunted Places, and More Tales of the Unexplained, each recounting the events from their perspective. The doll, the scratches on Lou's chest, and the notes on parchment paper were described in detail, framed as evidence of a persistent inhuman presence. For readers, it was a story both fascinating and terrifying, an ultimate brush with the paranormal that seemed to exist just on the edge of belief. Now, beyond the books, the Warrens took their story on the road. Lectures and public appearances brought Annabelle into classrooms, auditoriums, and conference halls. Audiences listened raptly as they recounted the doll's manipulation, the seance, and the dangers of unseen forces and how you may let them in. Even episodes of The X-Files loosely replayed Annabelle's story to the world. But interviews on radio, television, and in magazines expanded reach even further. Appearances on shows like Sightings and segments in various publications allowed the Warrens to recount Lou's attacks, the unusual activity, and their handling of the doll, making themselves out to be heroes of the paranormal world. Journalists and hosts often approach the story with a mix of skepticism and intrigue, much like you and I do, framing the Warrens as either fearless investigators, but mostly opportunistic storytellers. The Warrens ensured that the story of Annabelle, the Raggedy Ann doll who moved, attacked, and almost possessed, reached a global audience and became a recognizable part of paranormal culture. Now let's fast forward to the year 2013. Annabelle Higgins, or at least the story inspired by her, was about to reach a whole new audience. The release of The Conjuring and its huge success brought the doll into theaters worldwide, reimagined as a sinister, porcelain-faced figure far different from the small Raggedy Ann doll housed in the Warrens Museum. Though only a small part in the original Conjuring film, Annabelle's appearance amplified every element of the story, emphasizing the danger that would drive future films in the expanding franchise centered around the Warrens. And it all began in 2014, when audiences were first introduced to the doll as a symbol of terror on her own, simply just as Annabelle. And it all began in 2014 when audiences were first introduced the doll as a symbol of terror, as Annabelle was born in theaters worldwide.
Annabelle?
Now, I remember seeing this trailer in theaters and being hyped for the movie. Does the movie live up? Now that's another question. But no longer a cute little Raggedy Ann doll, and now a porcelain pale-skinned doll straight out of Doll Island. With heightened dramatics and a complete reimagination of the story, a trilogy quickly took shape. Oddly enough, the star of the film was actor Annabelle Wallis. And much like most of the stories that followed in the Conjuring universe, it was told the way the Warrens wanted it to be told. Lorraine Warren served as a consultant on The Conjuring and even made a brief cameo appearance in the film. As part of the agreement surrounding the project, there were restrictions on how the Warrens could be portrayed, ensuring they were not depicted in certain ways. Now, after the success of the first Annabelle film, it was followed up by Annabelle Creation, a prequel that explored the doll's origins and established a version of Annabelle that existed almost entirely separate from the Warrens' original account. The films gave her a personality, intent, and a cinematic history, transforming a quiet, mysterious object into a fully realized antagonist, and now with a name and a backstory for viewers to grasp onto, when before, we had almost nothing. And it's here that we return to the real-life accounts, the people involved, and the events that inspired the legend. Because the films, for all their spectacle, only tell part of the story. The true story of Annabelle Higgins is far more fascinating than what appears on the screen, mostly because we don't know who she is. Lorraine passed away in 2019 and was honored with a dedication on screen in Annabelle Comes Home. Ed, having passed away in 2006, had no involvement in the series at all. When we strip the story back to what can be independently verified, the haunting of Annabelle is far less dramatic than the versions that surround it. The object at the center of all this is simply a Raggedy Ann doll. An ordinary, mass-produced soft toy with red yarn hair and a triangular nose that would not stand out except for the narratives attached to it. The claims that it moved on its own, walked from room to room, or physically attacked anyone have no contemporaneous documentation. And there are no police records, medical records, or independent eyewitness accounts that confirm these events ever occurred. Where's Donna? Where's Lou? Where are their writings? Experts who study folklore and paranormal claims point out that the only source for the original Annabelle narrative are the later testimonies of Ed and Lorraine Warren and secondary retellings based on them. There's no first-hand public testimony from Donna, Angie, or Lou themselves in archived records, interviews, or official documents. Every description of unusual phenomena comes through the Warrens' interpretation rather than the direct words of the people who allegedly experienced it. While there may be old interviews out there, they are well sought after online, and sleuths and paranormal enthusiasts have yet to uncover them. Skeptical investigators and researchers who look at the Annabelle story through a critical lens see it as part of a broader pattern in paranormal folklore. Outlets like the Encyclopedia of Urban Legends and researchers such as Benjamin Radford have noted that the haunted doll narratives often follow established storytelling patterns. An object is given a tragic backstory, unexplained occurrences are interpreted as paranormal, and the tale grows through repetition and embellishment over time. In this case, through a $2 billion franchise. Critics also highlight inconsistencies and changes in the Warrens' own retellings over the decades. Early news coverage and writings about the case differ from the later versions, including who was involved, what happened, and how the events went down. From a scientific perspective, and I know, I use the dirty word, science, it's said that objects do not trap spirits, nor is there empirical evidence that spirits can attach themselves to inanimate things like dolls. Many psychologists and cultural historians see haunted objects as psychological and sociological phenomena, stories people create to make sense of fear or unexplained events. The success of the Annabelle legend, in this view, reveals more about human imagination and cultural storytelling than about any genuine paranormal force. Does that mean it didn't happen? Of course not. But to believe in the paranormal is to also believe in debunking the paranormal, and in this case, we truly may never really know what happened. But what we do have is documented cases, especially some in recent events, that lean more towards the fact that there is something inside the doll. And what fun is believing if skeptics didn't exist to prove wrong? Now, when scrolling TikTok or Instagram Reels late at night, you're very frequently going to find influencers and paranormal investigators circling around Annabelle. The Warrens Occult Museum is now one of the hotspots for YouTubers and investigators to check out, especially now owned by a YouTuber himself, Elton Castee, and viral comedian Matt Rife. Since the ownership change, investigations are now private and fill up fast. Hopefully one day that changes and more people can experience the Warrens Occult Museum and lifetime of work. But nonetheless, EVPs are caught when contacting the doll, much like some found by one of my favorite accounts, Supernatural Sleuth, who posted a video of Annabelle at Scarefest in Lexington, Kentucky. And what appears in her glass enclosure behind her is nothing short of mind-blowing. Those are also available on Instagram and TikTok. One of the earliest and most widely repeated stories tied to the Warrens Occult Museum involves a visitor who allegedly mocked the Annabelle doll. According to Tony Spera, the museum's caretaker and Lorraine Warren's son-in-law, a young man reportedly tapped on the glass case and taunted the doll. On his way home, he was killed in a motorcycle crash after running into a tree while his girlfriend survived. The couple had been talking about the doll moments before the accident. Over the years, Tony Spera himself has stated that museum visitors have reported a range of unusual experiences around the Annabelle case. Such reports include sudden dizziness or nausea near the display, nightmares involving the doll shortly after a visit, unexplained scratches or bruises, and electronic devices failing when people attempt to photograph or film the case. In 2025, one of the most recent events occurred as senior paranormal investigator Dan Rivera suddenly died while leading a nationwide tour featuring the Annabelle at their stop in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a location already well known for tragedy. Local authorities reported no unusual circumstances at the scene, and the doll was not present in the room at the time of his death. The coroner said that Rivera had a known history of cardiac issues, which were consistent with the findings upon his autopsy. YouTubers Sam and Colby, while investigating the Annabelle doll, were able to work with Dan Rivera, and a dedication appears on the screen in what was one of his last videos that he was featured in. Now, could all of these be a coincidence tied to Annabelle? No one knows for sure, but what we do know is if you visit the Occult Museum, it's within your own best interest to be respectful to not only Annabelle, but the other haunted objects that surround her. In the internet age, stories grow, not just when people hear them once, but when they are repeated, visualized, and shared over and over across platforms. YouTube in particular has played a significant role in keeping the Annabelle narrative alive. Channels with millions of subscribers revisit the case, producing video essays, documentary-style breakdowns, and commentary on alleged encounters. Some creators like Elton, who runs the Overnight channel, Sam and Colby, like we just mentioned, and others publish content that keep Annabelle in the public eye. Their videos generate millions of views, driving further interest, clicks, and discussion. A full investigation of the Warrens' Occult Museum is now available on the Overnight channel for your viewing, whether you're a skeptic or a believer. When users search for Haunted Doll, the Conjuring Universe clips, museum footage, and commentary videos appear first, not historical records or critical analysis. Where are those videos? Where are those interviews with Donna, Angie, and Lou that the Warrens claim exist? Algorithms push content that garners engagement, and the Annabelle story checks every box. There's mystery, danger, visuals, and the narrative continues across films and now personal accounts. Encounters of Annabelle are very out there. Whether viewers approach the video skeptically or as believers, the sheer volume of content creates a social impression that the story is larger and more verified than it actually is. This is the nature of modern folklore. Stories that are repeated widely online come to feel real, even through mass exposure. Yet, in all of this attention, the actual human, if she ever existed at all, gets lost. We have no verified evidence that a real person named Annabelle Higgins lived, let alone that her spirit became attached to an object or was used as a vessel to do so. There is no birth record, no death certificate, no independent testimony outside of the narrative constructed by the Warrens and those who tell their version of the story. The face people associate with Annabelle in the movies is fictional. The doll people photograph in the museum is just a Raggedy Ann doll after all. The name itself appears only because it was reported during a seance that cannot be verified. And we cannot overlook the Conjuring Universe's depiction of Ed and Lorraine Warren, presented as a devoted New England couple gifted with the ability to confront evil. In reality, the Warrens lived as much in controversy as they did in fame. Numerous documentaries, including Devil's Road, the true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren, along with countless YouTube deep dives, explore their history, their cases, and the blurred line between legend and fact. Draw your own conclusions about them as people and human beings. But regardless of where you stand, their work and the conversations they spark within the paranormal community helped shape the landscape we continue to explore today. As of this recording, Annabelle lives in the Warrens' Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, under the supervision of Elton Castee and his crew. According to HauntedWarrenMuseum.com, Annabelle will be moved to a new location starting in August 2026. It states, "New overnight dates coming soon. These dates will not have Annabelle or 15 other well-known Warren haunted artifacts in the museum during your stay. Everything else in the house will stay exactly the same. In August of 2026, we will be opening a new permanent museum in a public location where these items would move." Now, where that location is remains to be seen. Some rumors claim it to be Salem, but as of this recording right now, there has been no formal announcement. At its core, the tale of Annabelle reflects a broader pattern we see across history. Women and girls, real or imagined, become symbols or vessels for people's fear and interpretation. If Annabelle Higgins was a real person who lived and died, we do not know her story beyond what others have chosen to attribute to her. It's impossible to say what her personality was like, what her hopes were, or whether she left behind a family or friends who remembered her with love instead of lore. In the midst of all the videos, articles, and films, we should acknowledge that we simply do not have evidence of her existence beyond the testimonial narrative. And if Annabelle was ever a living person, we can only hope that she is at peace, no longer a character in a legend, and no longer disturbed by the narratives that have grown around her name. In the next episode, we step into a house built to confound the dead, where every hallway twists in ways that seem to defy logic, and every room tells the story of grief, obsession, and fear. We'll explore the life of Sarah Winchester, a woman whose choices were misunderstood and whose legacy became legend. I'm Johnny Clash, and this is Paranormal Unsettled.
Paranormal Unsettled is written and produced by Johnny Clash. Want more unsettling content? Subscribe to Johnny Clash XP on YouTube and Paranormal Unsettled on TikTok. For gaming content, follow on Twitch and social media at Johnny FN Clash. Like and subscribe.